So, I don't know if you guys know this, although I'm sure you do. I enjoy a good audiobook or podcast. In fact, if I ever tell you I read this book, that was a little bit of a lie, because I do almost all of my learning by listening rather than reading. I'm a bit too ADD to actually sit down and read, and I think no one is surprised in here. But I was listening recently to a podcast. Is a guy named Jordan Peterson, and he was interviewing a guy named Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is a pretty well-known atheist. I think I've read you one of his quotes in here before that's about his opposition to God and how he doesn't believe that anything that looks like the God of the Bible would even be good for the world. And so he is a staunchly anti-religion, anti-God scholar. I mean, he's an accomplished scholar, and so that's his perspective. Jordan Peterson, on the other hand, is a clinical psychologist, and he's famous for a couple other reasons, but one of the things that he does that I think is really interesting is he approaches the Bible with that psychological lens. And now, as far as I understand it, this is a interaction between two non-believers. I don't know. I know for sure where Richard Dawkins would line up. I don't know exactly where Jordan Peterson would line up, but as far as I understand it, in our understanding of the term, we would not consider him to be a believer. I'm not saying a baptized Christian. I don't think he's that, but I don't think he's even someone who would profess belief the way that we would be familiar with. And so this is a conversation between two people who view the Scripture very differently. However, when Jordan Peterson reads the Bible, he says, wow, what incredible insight into the human condition and the truth about our world. This thing is true in a really powerful sense. When Richard Dawkins reads the Bible, he says, wow, what a terrible children's story. What a bunch of garbage. I've never read anything worse. Now, one of the fundamental, if you go find this interview, it's interesting. One of the fundamental differences between their perspectives is that Richard Dawkins is obsessed with, did this literally happen? Did it actually physically happen? And Jordan Peterson's perspective is, well, that's a bad question. Is it true? Does it reveal something true about the world? I don't care about that. Well, I don't care if it really happened. That's kind of the impasse that they come to in this, I think it was like an hour and 45-minute conversation that I listened to. Now, here's what's interesting. As they drilled down, they started talking about one particular story. They danced around a little bit, but one story stuck out to me, and it was the story of Cain and Abel. And Jordan Peterson's take on it was, listen, the story of Cain and Abel is powerfully true. Like he said, it's still true. In fact, it's true today, right? You have met a Cain in your life whose solution to problems was violence and whose insecurities caused him to lash out. I think I've been I might have been that person before. Like that's really true about people. Richard Dawkins said, if they weren't real people, then it isn't true. And so he drills down and he says, well, were there really brothers named Cain and Abel? And Jordan Peterson said, I mean, I don't know, but whether there were or not, it doesn't change the truth that's in this story. Now, as a different person listening to this conversation, as a believer, as a Christian listening to this conversation, I thought that was an exciting proposition to chase. Do these stories have to be literally true for them to hold truth? And I think one of the powerful answers is, no, they don't. There is truth within this story that is more deep, more psychologically telling about the human condition that humans back then would not have been able to do themselves. And for a believer, what that does for me is it points to the actual truth of the story. And so what I'm saying is, if you chase that rabbit of, does this have to be true in the literal sense for it to be true spiritually about humanity? I think that's a healthy exercise, a healthy question to ask. But when you discover that it is true in a deeper sense, I think that only points back to that it's reliably true in the literal sense as well. Anyway, I think they work off of each other. And I thought that was a really interesting conversation. And it excited me to ask, are there more things in this book that are a deeper kind of true? Are there more psychological truths about the human condition in this book that are more true than just this king took over this nation? That's true in one sense, but then sometimes humans' insecurities cause them to lash out in anger is also true in another sense. And so that was kind of my inspiration for this study. Is this book true in the psychological sense? We've also talked, and this is sort of another part of this. We've talked a number of times, or I have in my growing up. I guess maybe you haven't, but I've heard a number of lessons on what was the word that I used? Foretelling, the foreknowledge that the Bible has. And often that's associated with the scientific facts and foreknowledge. There's a website, if you want to look it up sometime. It's really fun, really beneficial. 101 Scientific Facts and Foreknowledge, I believe is what it's called. And it has 101 bullet-pointed things that the Bible knew about science and archaeology and history and biology that the Bible hinted at or said something about that later science figured it out. And so usually when we talk about the Bible's foreknowledge, it's somewhere in this realm. We talk about how it had predictive prophecies, or we talk about how, in one of the really famous ones is in Psalm 8, how in Psalm 8 it talks about these paths or currents in the sea, and then some guy in the 1800s was like, well, the Bible says there are paths and currents in the sea. Let's go look for them. And then he found them, and it's like, whoa, the Bible knew that about this world before humans even had the technology to understand that about this world. Incredible, and it is. But there's this other part of our life that is not just the physical, tangible world around us, and it is the things inside of us that drive us to do things, our spirits, our minds. And so does the Bible have that same kind of foreknowledge? That was my question, and I mean, if the answer was no, we'd stand and sing right now. So I think you understand. We're going to take a look at some of those ways that the Bible points to an understanding of what I'm calling the human condition, what it is to be a human, the way that we act, the way that we interact, our deficiencies, the reasons behind those deficiencies. And we're going to look at a couple of those. There's one. We're going to start with this one because I think it's fairly straightforward. I believe it was the 1970s, this language in the field of psychology around the study of codependency and the language of, or the term enabling kind of came into psychological vernacular. If you're not familiar with what this is, it's the idea that if someone has a problem and you don't help them stop that problem, or I should say actually, if you continue to help them stop that problem without teaching them how to work through that problem on their own, that you're really just enabling them to continue having the problem. It's the side of, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. It's that side of the coin. If I just keep giving you a fish, you don't ever have to learn to fish. You never have to learn how to fix the problem. And so if I continually fix this for you, I'm enabling you to live with and continue to have that problem. It can come up, one of the most common areas it comes up is in addiction, when people have substance addiction problems and a parent or a sibling or a spouse will just continue to allow them, maybe finance their behavior because they continually give them what they need to go feed that habit. It could also be emotional regulation. Maybe, again, a spouse helps somebody who has outbursts of rage. And when they have an outburst of rage, the spouse's job is appease and agree with and give them whatever they want. And really what it is what we did as parents, or what we often do as parents, especially in church. Not that there's never a time for this. In church might be the right time for this. But you give a kid a lollipop because they won't be quiet, right? And you're just enabling them to scream and get a lollipop. They're not learning how to be quiet, how to have self-control. This pops up all over the place, right? This idea of enabling. There was a psychologist who was talking about this and how it related to the Bible. Well, the place I learned this from, he said that he was on an airplane, and someone said, "What do you do?" Which apparently people don't like talking on airplanes. I love talking on airplanes, but I guess I'm the annoying one. I've been learning this in my life. Anyway, yeah, me and Dan would chat the whole time. I would annoy Pat. That's the way that would work. Listen, this is he's talking to this lady. He said, usually I don't tell people what I do because it's an invitation for a session, right? And he said, this time I indulged her. And she said, what do you do? He said, I'm a psychologist. And she goes, oh, I have this problem with my boyfriend, right? Immediately. And so the problem was that they broke up and she was devastated. And he goes, well, why'd you break up? Well, because he has this temper and he will, throw these huge fits and get really angry and it'll really hurt me and then I'll leave and then I'll miss him so much and I'll just come right back. And then he'll get angry again and it'll hurt me and then I'll leave. And he goes, and the guy said, well, it's interesting. And he said, if you deliver a man of wrath, you will only have to do it again. That's what he said. And he said that the woman was taken aback. Well, that's really great advice. If you help somebody, if you appease someone in their moment of wrath, you're just going to have to do it again later. Amen. Okay. She said, who said that? That's great advice. He said, well, actually, Solomon did. This is a quote from Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 19. A man of great wrath will pay the penalty, for if you deliver him, you will only have to do it again. And so they're right here. I mean, thousands of years before the terminology of enabling and codependency was in the vernacular of people, Solomon saw there's wisdom here, that there's an insight into humans. If you enable people to continue to act this way, you've started down a slippery slope. You're going to continue to do this same behavior. This idea of enabling or being guilty of someone else's problem by not stepping in the appropriate way is also in Leviticus. It talks about, in Leviticus 19, it says, you shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your neighbor, lest you incur sin because of him. And so there's this idea that if you are not going to take action to help this other person, that you're guilty the same as them. And I think this story is prevalent in the book of Jonah as well. God told Jonah, go to Nineveh and preach to these people so that they'll repent. And I think the part we teach is, Jonah didn't listen to God. Sure, but Jonah also maliciously wanted to enable Nineveh to destroy themselves. That was actually his intent. He did not want to go help them. And he was wrong because of that. Obviously, God told him to do it. But I think that you can reason here that if Jonah was watching people oppress others and be wicked and hurt and kill themselves, like there's an obligation there as a follower of God and a valuer of human life to step in some way and try to help, especially in Jonah's case as a prophet of God. And so you see this idea of enabling, well, it's all over the pages of Scripture. There's another one. This was probably this. Should you do your favorite one second? Yes, that's what we're going to do. There is a psychology of attachment that is, I don't know how recently, but fairly recently, within in the 1900s, it was developed. This understanding that humans, one of their fundamental needs, one of their fundamental modes of operating is in relationship, that they need connections, that if a human is severed from connection, they will go crazy, that they will have severe mental distress. And as a result of these observations that psychologists have studied, and it has been consistently borne out through tests and research that humans fundamentally need connection. And when we say connection, we really mean relationship. It's a lack of relationship or a lack of connection. Often, and I don't know, this is psychology for you guys. A lot of this has to do with our parenting, which is terrifying to read about with a 5, 3, and 1-year-old. But the attachment, a severed attachment or a lack of connection can cause developmental delays, a delay in brain development, like the actual physical development of the brain. It can cause a compromised immune system. It can keep physical developments from happening appropriately, and it can stunt emotional growth, often called arrested development. And so all of these things are a result of people not having connections or relationship in their life. And I think that's really interesting. What they have found as the solution to this problem in the field of psychology is bad relationships hurt us and good relationships heal us. Now, for example, if you have a severed relationship or a bad, unhealthy relationship with your parent, you don't have to have the next day a good relationship with your parent to heal that. But if you have a good relationship or a grounded relationship with someone else, it will allow that severed relationship to heal in you. It doesn't necessarily fix the relationship, but it fixes the damage that relationship has done, if that makes sense. And so good relationships can heal a person who is damaged from bad relationships. Good relationships don't always heal the bad relationships, but they heal the person because people need connection. People need relationship. And so I could not help, as I was learning this, but think of Genesis chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, 12, 13, 14. I mean, it's all over the book. But a quick refresher on, I think I taught this lesson a couple years ago now. So in Genesis chapter 2, when God creates humans, like the first thing he says about him is that it is not good, or the first negative thing he says about him is that it is not good for man to be alone. So right there on the pages of Scripture, we have this fundamental component of humans, that humans are meant for relationship. We also have in Genesis 1 where God describes humans as partnering with him and ruling over the world. Okay, so there is a relationship between God and humans, that humans need relationship with other humans. And then in Genesis 3, when we look at the temptation that Eve is caught in the middle of there, we defined a couple years ago relationship, or a good relationship, as trust and respect and desire. And if you have a healthy relationship, you have these three things. You have mutual trust, mutual respect, and mutual desire for each other. And when the serpent tempts Eve, read some of this. When the serpent tempts Eve in Genesis 3, he attacks all three of those components of the relationship that the human has with God. So Genesis 3 and verse 1, the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God actually say you shall not eat of any tree in the garden?" And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die." But the serpent said to the woman, You will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Now, we read all the way through that, but let's point out a couple of things. Did the serpent attempt to undermine the respect that Eve had for God? Absolutely. He actually basically said, you can't respect this guy because he's holding out on you. You should not respect his boundaries that he has drawn for you. You shouldn't. And why shouldn't you respect him? Because you can't trust him. He's holding out on you. He doesn't want you to have what he has. And so he's holding out on you, and he wants you to have less than what he has, and that's why you shouldn't respect him. And in this argument, the serpent, you'll notice the language even lends itself to the way that we've defined relationship. The serpent changed the desire within Eve. She saw the fruit, saw that it was good to the eyes, and that it was desirable to make one wise. And, well, that's what she desired now, more than she desired God. So the serpent attacks the relationship between God and man. A couple chapters later, you'll notice that the relationship between humans has become horribly corrupt. So bad that the whole world is full of violence, which is like the quintessential way of describing strife between humans. Like, if it goes to blows, the relationship has been severed in a lot of cases, right? Or at least the relationship is not healthy. And so the flood comes and has to cleanse the earth and start over, and God's spirit is actually separated from humans in that story. And then in Genesis 11, there's this story where all humans are together and have one language, and they're working together to do this incredible thing for themselves. And God, as a result of their rebellion, has to come down and confuse their language. And now suddenly you have all these different nations, all these different tribes that started off as one family, and are now all enemies. And if you just read the story of Genesis and chart the names and chart the nations, you will recognize very quickly these are all brothers fighting with each other. Every tragedy in Genesis is a result of severed relationship and connection. That's the whole book. I mean, it's the whole story. And so when you ask, hey, did the Bible have an inkling about humans and their design for connection and relationship? Man, from page one it did. This is something, the insight into the human condition, the need that humans have to be in relationship that the Bible had all the way at the very beginning. And then we said that the solution to this, right? The solution to the severed relationships is healthy relationships. I think this is really interesting. We spend a lot of time in the church. My whole growing up, and if you go back the last probably couple hundred years, and as I'm actually learning, the last several hundred years, I read a book on Martin Luther recently, and this is one of the driving problems that he had in his life as well. We spend a lot of time emphasizing the severed connection between humans and God. Now, is that an important part of the story? Of course. But it's not the whole story. And if psychology has discovered that the solution to severed relationship is healthy, grounded relationship, where is that part in the biblical narrative? Where are these? What is the healthy, grounded? It's Jesus. Listen, humanity had a severed relationship with God. Genesis 3, Genesis 6, Genesis 11, every story after that. Then Jesus is the healthy relationship. The relationship built on self-sacrifice. The relationship built on mutual trust and respect and desire that can heal the person and bring them back into a right relationship with their parent. I just thought that was fascinating. That's the solution to the problem of humans and sin in the world, and it's also the gospel. That's incredible. And so the Bible has this psychological foreknowledge about the human condition and the need for attachment. That was my favorite one, so it was a little longer, but I'm going to go through the next couple a little bit quicker. Humans have a need for agency over their life. Psychology's understood that if a human feels like they have no control in their world or no control over their life, this is one of the driving factors for anxiety and depression and even suicidal ideation, is when you feel like, man, I don't have any say. Nothing matters. Everything is hopeless. I have no control in my world. That lack of agency is one of the driving factors for a declining mental health. Jesus, though, does not want to control us because control takes away a human's agency, doesn't it? I remember as a young kid thinking it would have been a lot easier if God just made us robots and forced us to do everything the right way. And yet, man, that's why I wasn't God back then, because that would not help humans be who God wanted them to be. It would take away their agency. Instead, Galatians 5 says that for freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. See, Jesus brought freedom. He did not bring slavery. Jesus gave freedom and agency. He did not bring control. Every other king in the history of the world has ruled over people with control. Jesus showed up, and he ruled with freedom. It speaks to what humans need, agency over their life. In the story of Cain and Abel, there are a lot with that story, but one of the things that I thought was really interesting is in the story of Cain and Abel. You look at Genesis 4, I think it's verse 6. Abel and Cain both offer their sacrifices, and the Lord prefers or favors Abel's sacrifice. And when God comes to Cain, he's in verse 6, it says, "The Lord said to Cain, 'Why are you angry, and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it.'" There is a lot here, but the one that stuck out to me was this depiction of sin as an entity. Within the last probably 50 years or so, addiction has been redefined as an illness. Not a lack of self-control, not a deficiency within you, but an actual sickness similar to cancer or similar to a flu or a virus. It's been understood through studying alcoholics specifically, but addicts in general, that the way that addiction grabs hold of a person and the way that someone becomes an addict, you don't get let go from that. It's not as simple as self-control or self-will, but it is something that is more present and more real, almost as if it's crouching at the door, ready to devour you if you let it. Now, there are things you can do to fight against it, but describing sin or describing addiction as an entity that is working against you psychologically is accurate. And yet, this is how God described Cain's battle all the way in the beginning. Processing pain. There's a guy, some of you may have heard of him, Sigmund Freud. Some people love him, some people hate him. He's the father of modern psychology. He was brilliant. Not right about everything, but brilliant. One of his theories during his life was that in order for people to process pain, they have to go through it. They have to engage with it. And so this is what this meant. You couldn't, I should say, engage with it as opposed to ignore it, suppress it, or try to numb the pain, right? Like there's something about us inherent. And I think it might point to the fact that we were not created to live in the fallen world, but we were created to live in the garden. We look at the world and we know things are not right here. It's not right when someone is hurt. It's not right when someone is sick. And so how do we deal with these things? Well, this is the way most people would deal with it. And I might be stepping on toes because I know I've done all of these at different times, but we pretend it's not a problem. Then you wake up one day and realize, wow, that's a lot of debt. We pretend that we don't know it's a problem. All right, we just ignore it. We don't pretend it's not a problem, but like we don't even think about it. We just completely ignore it, and then someday it overtakes us. We numb it. Yeah. Okay. Maybe it's a problem, but I can't think about that right now, so I'm gonna turn towards something to make me feel better. That could be drinking, that could be substance, that could be shopping, that could be eating. We just turn to something that makes me feel, it could be working out. You can use good things for you as a number for bad things, and it's still a bad thing, right? It could be structure. Like, you turn to something that gives you pleasure and numbs the pain. Sigmund Freud's proposition that has been borne out to be true was that instead of numbing the pain, ignoring the pain, suppressing the pain, you have to face the pain. In essence, he said, you need to cry it out. You need to deal with what's bothering you, shed some tears over it if that's what you need to do, and then you'll actually be able to move past it and heal from it. That facing pain was how you would heal from pain. And so, you got to right away ask, is that principle in the Bible? Well, there's this very strange passage that as a kid I definitely didn't understand. In Ecclesiastes chapter 7, Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 2, it is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. Listen, the only way through pain, through it, is to acknowledge it. A sad face can make your heart glad. Psychologically and physiologically true. When you cry out pain, it allows you to heal from it. And this is again something the Bible knew long before we figured it out scientifically or psychologically. This is in the same vein. It's in a similar vein. But there's a thing called exposure therapy. The idea is if you have a severe phobia, then you would go to your therapist and they would say, well, okay, you're afraid of spiders, and maybe you talk through it a little bit, but eventually you say, the therapist would tell you, okay, you're going to need to face your fears, right? And so we're going to do that by having a spider in a box, and you're going to hold the box. I can't do that. I can't do that. I'll break down. I'll be a mess. I can't. I could never. Well, this is called exposure therapy. You're going to expose the person to the thing that is that they are fearful of, or sometimes that is killing them, right? Because these phobias they can take a hold of your life. And so you expose the person to the thing that is killing them. Sometimes it is confrontation. I can't do confrontation. So I can't do anything at work. It's ruining my life. Okay, well, we're going to go have confrontation on purpose so that you can get over your fear of confrontation. It's just exposure therapy. It's also the foundation for exposure therapy is also the same thought process or the same reasoning behind vaccines. A little bit of what you're afraid of or a little bit of the thing that could kill you will actually make you stronger. And so if you're terrified of spiders, well, being close to spiders will help you not be terrified of spiders. If you are getting sick, a little bit of the sickness can help your body build an immunity to it, right? So exposure therapy. This is what's really interesting. This one is not said plainly, but the thought process or the idea behind it is prevalent in the Bible. Numbers chapter 21. I don't think we're going to be able to read this whole story, but it's not a very long story. Numbers 21, you have the story of the Israelites grumbling. That narrowed it down a lot, didn't it? No, it didn't at all. There's like 18 of those. But in Numbers 21, you have the story where the Israelites are grumbling, and God sends what are called fiery serpents, which is probably just a way of saying poisonous snakes. And so these poisonous snakes come out, and they bite the Israelites, and they're dying because poison. And they cry out to Moses, and they're like, hey, you've got the ticket to go talk to God. Go talk to him and have him fix this, please. And so Moses does. He goes, and God says, well, I did send the snakes, and I think they've learned their lesson. I'll take them back now. Now, that would make a lot of sense, but that's not what God says. He doesn't say, well, you know what? This is just how I'm going to do it. You guys are going to have to deal with it because you complained. Sorry, there's nothing I can do. This is the consequence of your action. Which, again, would have been within his reason, within his right, but it's not what he says. Instead, he says this very weird thing. And actually, there's an episode of The Chosen where they portray a conversation between Joshua and Moses as to how this could have felt when this took place. It's maybe a 4-minute clip in the show, but it's really interesting. God tells Moses, I want you to go build a bronze serpent. I want you to put it on a pole, and I want you to raise that pole up in the air. Didn't the Israelites get in trouble just a couple chapters ago for making an image and worshiping? Like, you can see how that was a little unsettling, and that's what the Chosen does. It has Joshua burst into the tent and say, this is idolatry. What are you doing? And Moses rips into him and says, this is what God said. I'm not questioning him, which is a really cool scene. 4 minutes. Go look it up on YouTube. It's really neat. Anyway, so they build this bronze serpent. They put it on a pole. They raise it up into the sky. And if any Israelite, this is what they're told, any Israelite who looks at the serpent will live. But any of them who doesn't look at the serpent will die. Well, you can see the fundamental thought process of exposure therapy right there. If you look at the thing that is killing you, you live, right? A little bit of the thing that is killing you actually heals you. Well, in just that story, you've got the foundation for this exposure therapy, this psychological understanding of the way our brains work. Let's do one more. I kind of want to do two more. Let's do one more. We have time for one more. Joseph, don't go long. No reason. Just so you know, that battle is in my head. Like every time. Just so you know. All right. If you ever sit here and you think Joseph just likes to hear himself talk, he's just a long-winded preacher. He doesn't care. Every time. That's happening in here. Every time. All right. So we're going to do one more because I just outed myself here. Listen, the psychologists have recently categorized two fundamental or basic human, how would you say it? Drives. Needs, desires. These are things that drive action. So it's not like you have a need for water, right? So these aren't basic human needs, but they're basic human motivations. It is the thing that makes you do a thing. There are basically two of them. Obviously, there are a lot more. But if you generalize and you try and reduce it down as simply as you can, there are two that most everything fits into. Kind of like when you talk about, the whole law is summed up with love God and love your neighbor. Well, there's a lot more to it than that, but those are the two main buckets, right? These are the two main buckets of human drive, and it is love and aggression. Now, love, I think we all kind of understand, right? The basic human drive of love. I love, and so I do. I want good things I want to do good things things are right with you and me, and so I'm going to, out of that love, produce something, right? And you can see that in a lot of different ways. But when we hear aggression, I think a lot of us have at least I do, have this idea of aggression as being like, bad and violent. If you reduce it all the way down to a baby, for the example, I think it helps to understand the concept. If a baby is doing something out of love, well, it means things are right in the world for a baby. Out of love, a baby will sleep. A baby will snuggle. A baby will be quiet, Like that's what a baby does out of love, because things are right in the baby's world. When things are wrong in the baby's world, the drive of aggression will come out. And what does it sound like for a baby? I'm going to do the only thing I can do to affect the people that can make this better. Wah! Right? Like that's what a baby does out of aggression. The world is wrong and it needs fixed. That is the drive of aggression. And when it's a child, it looks like screaming your head off, because you got to affect the world in the way that you can as a human. As a Christian, it might be feeding the hungry, loving your neighbor, right? Like that might be the world is not right and I'm going to do something to affect it. An act of aggression, that's what we're talking about in this context. It's the world is wrong and I'm going to affect something to change it, to make it right. And obviously, you can see how that human drive, channeled the wrong way, can be destructive. The world is wrong and I'm going to make it right. And if you're not with me, like that's how wars get started. Okay? And you can see how if someone has the drive of love only, with no aggression, that drive of love, that nothing's wrong, everything is good, you're good, everything is good, we're fine, nothing needs to change, that could be channeled wrong as well. I mean, it's almost like too much love doesn't make for good children, and too much aggression or too much change and rigidity and structure doesn't really make for good children. You think about this, like if a parent only loves a child and refuses to admit when things are wrong, because I can say this now as a 6-year expert, sometimes kids are wrong. Sometimes they need changed and correct. If a parent doesn't see that or doesn't act on that, if they are not driven with the aggression side to correct some of those things in a child, and they only give love all the time, comfort, peace, and they appease, and a lot of these things that we've talked about already are involved in that. How many of us have met that kid when they grew up? Boy, they're not pleasant adults. They are not easy to be around. They're difficult people, because everything in their world was made right by somebody else all the time, their whole growing up. How many of us have met the other kind of person who nothing in their world was ever right? And they have what seems to be an insatiable desire to make everything in their world right, because nothing was ever right. And this is actually how OCD develops in a lot of cases. The inability to control your environment during your upbringing results in your hyperfixation on controlling what you can. And so OCD develops. I can control how many times I tie my shoes. I can control how many door frames I touch on my way through. You control what you can because you couldn't control anything else, because everything was put on you in terms of aggression. All right, that's okay. So aggression and love, when these things get out of balance, they make for damaged humans. That's what they do. And so a great parent or a good parent does their best to balance these things. When their child is out of place, they employ some loving aggression to guide and correct and to train the child. When things are right, they employ love and aggression to continue and help the child learn and grow from, hey, not everything is always right. And what we're really doing is we're taking black and white and making it gray. Because the other thing that will happen And this is a mental illness called borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder. These are the kind of things that will come of this. One of the fundamental problems there is that they don't believe the two can exist at the same time. Either things are right and you are a great person, we get along great, or you make me mad once and suddenly everything is wrong. These are very volatile people because they can't see that, well, there's good and bad all the time. Sometimes some things are right and some things are wrong, and here's how you handle those things in those situations. They have a very black and white view. People who have grown up with this out of balance have a very black and white view of the world and of people, and it causes the mistreatment of people in a lot of cases. So, as a parent, the ultimate goal then is to integrate these and help your children to be able to see both and act accordingly all the time. You want to give love with limits, and you want to use the aggression to loving aggression to guide and shape children and teach them how to treat people. Okay, so all of that's a lot. But really what we're saying is that humans need to have both of these drives in them and use them in harmony with each other all the time. Here's where the Bible reveals something really beautiful. There's this being, let's call him God, who perfectly embodies both of these drives all the time. Psalm chapter 85 talks about God. It says that he's the place where steadfast love and faithfulness meet, righteousness and peace kiss each other. See, he's righteous. He's going to make things right and do the right thing. If something is wrong, God's going to take care of it. But also, he's going to keep peace. You think about the flood. The story of the flood is a story of God's justice and mercy and grace, all happening in the same event. You think about John chapter 1, where it says that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. It says, we've seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. I think I've referenced this lesson several times, but Weldon Fleming did a lesson on this divine dichotomy a couple summers ago. And that's really what we're talking about here. This whole book is telling you a story of a God who has perfectly threaded both of these desires, both of these motivating desires in a human. We've got those. I think it's part of what makes us like God, is that we are motivated by love and we are motivated by the world not being right. And over and over and over and over and over again, we're told a story about a God who perfectly embodies good parenting, who perfectly embodies love and aggression. He's never too aggressive with his children because he loves them. And he never loves his children too much to assert some aggression when it's needed. This is the story, and this is the God we serve. And it's reminiscent and embodied in a picture when Jesus says to the woman caught in the act of adultery, neither do I condemn you, love. And from now on, sin no more. Aggression. Things are not exactly right in the world. You shouldn't be committing adultery. That's obvious. But I'm not condemning you for your failings. That's love. You're not suddenly not a human because you've done something wrong. This is the God that we serve. This perfect parent, this excellent balance, perfect balance of love and aggression is the character. These are the fundamental tenets of the character of the God that we serve. And it's really good news. It's really good news to tell someone, yeah, your parents might not have been great. I mean, listen, I'm not so surprised, you guys, by telling you my parents weren't perfect. I think they've said that publicly before. I know that currently I am not a perfect parent. I think today can tell you stories about that. Certainly yesterday was a hard day. What incredible news to hear that there is a perfect, loving Father out there in the world. And when I say in the world, he's here. And he wants connection with you, something you need to survive, to live. And he's given you a book that has insight and understand. When my parents used to tell me, I know you better than you know yourself, there was definitely a time when that was true, right? I now know this as a parent of kids. I know why you're saying this, Moses. You think you can sneak it and get away with it, right? You're tired. That's why you're acting like, I know this. When God says, I know you better than you know yourself, well, he told it to us right here. This whole book is full of things about humans that our God knows because he made us and he loves us. This is really, really good news. And this, to be a child of this God, to be able to be adopted by this God, is the invitation. That's the good news that we go around telling people. You can be one of his children. And man, does he treat his children right. Unlike any other parent in the history of the world, this God, this Father, wants to be your Father. And he will treat you right because he's a perfect Father. This is our invitation. The Bible points to this God over and over and over again. And the Bible, I think, is reliable because it has these insights into what it is to be a human. All of that, I think, is something we can take from the lesson tonight. And if you need to respond to the invitation, if you need prayers of the church, let us know and we'll love you. We'll pray with you while we stand.